as well as go through sun protection and also how to use anti-aging creams and how to understand that. So it's going to be something that is, of course, very near and dear to my heart because my initial postgraduate training was in dermatology. So after 4 years of medical school and then 1 year of internal medicine, I spent 3 years studying dermatology. I'm a board certified dermatologist as well. And then in 2004, as I've mentioned many times, I had a patient by the name of Karen who cured herself of lupus. And at that point, I started studying lifestyle modifications, lifestyle medicine, how to use diet for reversal of various first skin diseases. And then I consulted with a lot of people and other physicians on how to reverse things through natural ways, but with a very disciplined scientific approach. And I still practice dermatology as well as do lifestyle management, lifestyle medicine as well. So this is something that is of interest to me, and I continue to sort of stay up on it. And I'm also excited to share with you some of the things about diet and how they impact the skin, as well as, look, we all want to look young. We all want to look the best we can. And tonight we'll talk about specific dietary strategies as well as topical strategies, how to understand how to buy anti-aging creams so that you can keep your skin as youthful as possible. Of course, we all definitely want that. See, we have a bunch of other people that came in. Welcome, everyone. And let me share my screen and we'll get started. All right, here we go. So hopefully you can see my screen, and let me blow it up a little bit and then we can get started. So tonight we are going to be breaking things down in this category. So first we'll talk about the sun, then sun and diet, controversies and sun protection. You know, you really need to understand exactly how to protect your skin in the sun. There's lots of controversies. We'll be talking about SPF and the difference between sunblocks and sunscreens. Then we'll talk a little bit about the skin microbiome. Of course, we've spoken a lot about the gut microbiome, but your skin also has a microbiome. And then we'll end tonight's episode 33 with anti-aging strategies, and we'll go through that as well. So let's jump right into it and start talking about the impact of sun and your skin so you have a better understanding of it. First of all, look, we are humans that evolved in the sun. So it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to completely avoid the sun. I mean, this is something that we evolve with. The issue is, of course, that people who evolved, humans that evolved around the equators developed more skin pigmentation to protect themselves against the sun. But nowadays, someone like me who is very pale lives in South Florida. Genetically speaking, this is not probably the best place for someone with my skin tone to be living, evolutionarily speaking. So one has to pay attention to the fact that we might not have the natural skin pigmentation that suits the latitude that we live in. And if we don't have an understanding of that, and we just think, well, sun can't be all that dangerous because, we evolved in the sun, then we're not understanding the impacts that latitude have on the amount of skin pigmentation that we have. So one thing that I recommend everyone get is to try to get some morning sunlight. There are actually some protective wavelengths of infrared that are in very early, very sunrise type of light that actually protects the skin, believe it or not. Certain amounts of infrared light can actually increase the resiliency of your skin against light later on in the day. But more importantly than anything else, that's sort of a mild effect. The most important thing about getting morning sunlight into your eyes without sunglasses on in the early morning is that it's very, very good for your mood, and it actually affects your neurotransmitter levels, which is going to impact your overall mood and is very, very beneficial. Now, there are people who have what's called seasonal affective disorder that they need to get a certain amount of light because it can affect their overall mood if they're at a northern latitude and it's gray and they're not getting a lot of sun. So what about vitamin D? Well, let's talk about vitamin D. First of all, vitamin D is part of the process of vitamin D happens in the skin, and then goes inward and then gets processed into sort of the final version. But vitamin D is one of the big steps in the production of vitamin D happens in your skin. The problem is that the amount that you need to get is that the amount of sun that you need to get is for most people, the overwhelming majority of people, is going to put their skin at risk in terms of sun protection. And that's something to keep in mind. It basically means that, you know, the darker your skin, because it's really remarkable when you look at the skin under the microscope, the DNA of each cell is, you know, you can see it under the microscope. And of course, you want your DNA to be protected against radiation, and sunlight is a form of radiation. And what's remarkable is that your body produces melanin, which is a skin pigment, and it actually looks like a little umbrella over top of the DNA of the nucleus of the cell. It's really an amazing thing, and that's what it's there for. It's there to protect your skin, your DNA specifically, from the ultraviolet light radiation. So if you have a lot of the darker and the dispersed skin that you have, you're not going to have as much penetration of the ultraviolet light radiation, which basically means that if the darker your skin, the more sun you're going to need. And I've spoken at length, or I should say multiple times, about the fact that they did this study of Hawaiian surfers who you would think wouldn't be vitamin D deficient, but as they got darker and they were in the sun, many of them were actually vitamin D deficient. So you can't really rely on the sun to get vitamin D, because quite frankly, a lot of us have sort of forfeited our ability because of extensive sunburns as a kid. For us to rely on vitamin D at this point from the sun, it's going to be a little bit of overkill. Vitamin D is a hormone, and it helps to absorb calcium from the food you eat. But in addition to that, it has a whole host of things that affect all kinds of things, like reducing cancer rates, improving your immune system, so many different things. And essentially, basically there's many different factors that affect vitamin D synthesis. So we've spoken about darker skin, but also the higher amount of body fat you have, the less that you're going to be converting sunlight into vitamin D. Age, the older you get, the more difficult it is for your skin to convert as well. And of course, being at a higher latitude. So as an example, if you're in Boston or north of Boston, there's just simply not enough sun from November to March to get enough vitamin D from the sun. Higher than that in Canada, it's from mid-October to mid-March. And so in those particular areas, if they didn't have vitamins, well, what did they do, thousands of years ago? Well, they ate foods that had vitamin D in them. They were, the further north you went, we've all heard of doing cod liver, cod livers from Scandinavia during the wintertime. And that was something that there were certain dietary traditions that incorporated vitamin D in their food. Of course, getting vitamin D in your food these days, unless you're eating cod livers or liver for that matter, you're not going to be getting all that much vitamin D. Mushrooms have a little bit of vitamin D, but the fact is you're essentially going to need to take a vitamin D supplement. My ultimate recommendation is to get your level checked. You want it, 50 to 70 or so, and you should know what your vitamin D level is. And then you should take your vitamin D supplement, take it for a few months and check your levels. That's really the ultimate way to make sure that you're getting the vitamin D that you require. Vitamin D tests are very easy to get. If your doctor doesn't want to order it for you, you can go to Amazon and they have finger stick tests that they mail them to you, and you just prick your finger and put a little blood on a blood spot and send it in, and you can get your D checked that way. And also there's labs now that you can go into. There's a franchise called Any Labs Now. You can just walk in and get your vitamin D level checked. So there's no excuse not to know your vitamin D level, especially in the COVID situation that we're dealing with now. You want to make sure that your vitamin D level is at an optimal rate, optimal level. And so I think it's incumbent on all of you to actually know what your vitamin D level is. Okay, so let's move on. And when it comes to the sun, as I said, a lot of us have forfeited our ability to use the sun to get sort of vitamin D. And because of, tanning during teenage years and sunburns, etc. But one should always realize that the tanning essentially promotes wrinkles. And there's, there's a famous picture in one of the dermatology textbooks that basically is a Tibetan nun, one that became a nun, and then her twin sister who was a farmer. And they were both around 80 years old. And the one that was a monk, a Tibetan monk, who, was meditating in caves all day away from the sun, had perfectly smooth skin and looked, 20 years younger than her age. And her twin sister, who became a farmer, was deeply wrinkled and looked really, really, incredible amounts of irregular pigmentation and deep furrowed wrinkles. So the fact is that protecting your skin against the sun is probably always going to be your number one rule for making sure that you are going to have even skin tone as well as the least amount of wrinkles possible. Now let's talk about sun and diet, because the two actually have a role to play together. There was an Australian study that showed that higher consumption of fruits and vegetables showed a decrease in skin cancer of 54% compared to people who were eating a diet classified as meat. So basically, the people who are on sort of the meat and fat, what they characterize as meat and fat, if they compared the two, the group that was eating more fruits and vegetables had 54% less skin cancer than those who ate the other diet. And when it comes to protecting your skin against the sun, carotenoids are your best friend when it comes to diet. And these are the fat-soluble pigments in fruits and vegetables. And when you get that, if you're eating a lot of vegetables, your skin can actually develop a yellowish hue. Sometimes you would see this in people who drink a lot of carrot juice, but it can also just be seen in people who eat a lot of leafy green and yellow vegetables. And this pigment that gets deposited in the skin, having a lot of it in your skin actually protects your skin a little bit against the sun. It acts as a scavenger for free radicals, and it also increases, believe it or not, the natural SPF of your skin slightly, because it's going to be able to extend the amount of time before ultraviolet light radiation starts to burn your skin. So lycopene, which is of course found in tomatoes, things like tomato paste have an enormous amount of lycopene, and lutein, which is found in leafy greens, and astaxanthin, which is actually the red pigment that you find in salmon as well as shrimp. It's from a microalgae. A little bit of that is actually quite powerful at protecting your skin against the sun. And when people come to me and we talk about supplements for the skin to increase the amount of time that you can be in the sun without burning, I often recommend, of course, fern extract. It's called polypodium. And this is very commonly, you can get this as a supplement these days. Sometimes I combine this with a small dose of astaxanthin for people who want to have really optimal protection from something that they're taking internally. Polyphenols like green tea have also been studied and can be protective. And now let's speak a little bit about these supplements that I mentioned briefly. So the fern extract, again, increases the ability of your skin to be in the sun without burning, the length of time before you start burning. Very, very popular nowadays. You can find this just about in any supplement store. Nicotinamide. Now, nicotinamide is a form of niacin, and incredibly, it reduces the risk of basal cell and squamous cell carcinoma by 23%. And this is really an incredible thing. So anyone who has chronic sun damage, or you are going to your dermatologist every once in a while to get spots sprayed on your skin, little precancers, basal cells, squamous cells, and actinic keratoses, nicotinamide as a supplement. You can get this, costs, $10, $15 a month at the most. You just go to Amazon or any supplement store, and it literally has been studied extensively. It was published in the New England Journal of Medicine, the original study, to show how good of a study it was. And it reduces the incidence of squamous cell and basal cells by 23%, which is an incredible thing. So if any of you have relatives, and probably just about everyone knows someone who is going to the dermatologist to get spots sprayed off their face once they get to a certain age, should let them know about nicotinamide. Vitamin C is an overall good antioxidant, and for the skin, it helps with collagen. It helps with the antioxidant role, and we'll talk a little bit more about those two functions as we go through the rest of tonight's episode 33. As always, if you have any questions, please do type them into the chat box. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about some controversies in sun protection. And we're going to talk about the difference between sunblock and sunscreen. Then we'll talk a little bit about understanding what nanoparticles are. We'll talk about the difference between UVA and UVB, and then we'll end with my recommendations. So first, let's talk a little bit about the difference between sunblock and sunscreen. Sunblock basically works by reflecting the light off the skin. So light comes in and it essentially bounces off. Sunscreen works through a chemical reaction. So the sun comes down, the rays hit the skin, and then it disperses it as heat, essentially. That's sort of the chemical reaction that takes place. And overall, sunblocks are mineral. They're usually made of zinc or titanium, whereas sunscreens are chemicals, modified chemicals that work through various mechanisms to convert ultraviolet light into a conversion into heat. Now, most of these sunscreens often have some problems with them. Some of them are damaging to reefs when you're swimming at the beach. Some of them are endocrine disrupting chemicals, and they're not the most, I would say, they're very complicated chemicals. And if you look at the toxicology literature, they have, as I said, some issues, as I said, with affecting your endocrine levels in your body, your hormone levels and such. And the toxicology literature is pretty clear. It's pretty clear that some of these have potential for being not so good for you. Unfortunately, dermatologists, for the most part, just aren't really aware of what the toxicology has to say. Now, most dermatologists, like myself, recommend sunblocks over sunscreens, but not exclusively. For me, I only recommend sunblocks. So we're talking about either zinc or titanium, and I prefer zinc. This is essentially my main recommendation, is just stick to zinc. Now, the issue with zinc, we all know about zinc oxide. We have memories of putting the white stuff on the nose, or remember seeing the lifeguard with the white nose. Well, nowadays they're able to make it so that it rubs in and is not as white. This has led to a technology called nano. It's essentially a part of nanotechnology, which is basically where they're able to make the titanium into these nanoparticles, super, super tiny particles that allow you to rub it in, and therefore they can advertise things like clear zinc. Now, the issue is there are a few things to make note of here. First of all, nanoparticles are just as effective. Titanium or zinc nanoparticles are as effective as having a white nose. That's the first thing. The second thing is there is some concern that nanoparticles potentially could be dangerous. First of all, there is a difference between titanium and zinc. Zinc by far is more effective. There is some evidence that some is absorbed, but it's probably a very small amount. And these are fairly inert inert elements. And so I'm not all that concerned about nanoparticles. I don't feel all that bad about if I have a sunblock that happens to have nanoparticles of zinc oxide, it's not something that that I necessarily shy away from. I also recommend, Sharon's asking if I recommend zinc sunblock for children. I do, actually. There's some that are very, very inert, that are very harmless and that don't have nanoparticles. One of them is called Think Baby, which is a brand that's essentially just pure zinc. It does come out white, but again, even though it doesn't have nanoparticles, it does rub in with a little bit of time. That's the one I usually recommend for children. It's called Think Baby. There's another brand called Goddess Garden that's also just sort of plain zinc and really not much else in there. Both of these are sort of natural sunscreens. They work very, very well. And you'll understand in just a moment why zinc is preferable, or you'll understand more issues about that. So yes, Sharon, I do recommend, and I would look into Think Baby as a sunblock. You can get it at Whole Foods, I think. UVA versus UVB. So the SPF, when you look on a thing that says SPF of whatever, that basically represents the amount of time, the extra amount of time that you can spend in the sun, technically, before you're going to burn. It reflects only ultraviolet light B. See, ultraviolet light B is a type of radiation from the sun that is the one that is sort of, it doesn't penetrate. It's sort of higher intensity and is what causes the sun to cause a sunburn. Now, UVA has a longer wavelength, and as a result of that, it actually penetrates deeper into your skin. So when UVA penetrates deeper into the skin, this is going to be causing a fair amount of skin aging because it's getting to a place in the dermis, deeper down into the skin, that is going to have an effect on the collagen in the skin, which is going to cause photoaging and some issues with pigmentation, et cetera. And as I said, the SPF only reflects UVB. So you need to make sure that if you're not using a mineral-based sunblock like zinc, which of course is very broad spectrum, if you're using a chemical sunscreen, make sure it says broad spectrum. Years ago, broad spectrum only included like a little bit of ultraviolet light A, but the regulations have improved. So if it does say broad spectrum, it generally covers a great deal of UVA and UVB, because you can have an SPF of a gazillion on UVB, and it might not be protecting against UVA at all if it's a chemical sunscreen. Therefore, it would allow you to stay out in the sun for a longer period of time without burning, but at the same time getting an enormous amount of ultraviolet light A, which is going to cause wrinkling and photoaging and all those things that I just mentioned. So you need to make sure it's broad spectrum if you're using chemical sunscreens. If you're using zinc, you don't have to worry about it because zinc is covering the entire spectrum, not only of ultraviolet light A, ultraviolet light B, but also visible light. It's also actually protecting you against the light in the room. And for some people, believe it or not, especially women who are on hormonal treatments or birth control pills, can often get something called melasma, which is a pigmentary change in the skin. And for those particular patients, they can be so sensitive to light that even the light inside is going to make a difference. And therefore, for those particular patients, again, it's going to be zinc. You're going to want to have that broad spectrum, and you're going to want to protect yourself against it as best as possible. So my recommendation is just stick to zinc. I'm not concerned about nanoparticles. At least I should say I'm not overly concerned. You can always buy, as I said, like the Think brand, which is, just pure zinc, or Goddess Garden. But again, it does take a little bit of rubbing in, a good amount of rubbing in. Or you can buy the many varieties of clear zinc formulations out there to get the protection. Again, if I had to reach for one and I'm going out to the beach, let's say, I wouldn't hesitate to get one with nanoparticles, but there are certainly people out there that are cautious when it comes to the use of nanoparticles in sunblock. So there is there's a organization called the Environmental Working Group, EWG.org, and they have a list of safe sunblocks. They have a whole skin section so that you can look at various toxins. You know, they're going to list every potential toxin, even if it has, you know, one article in the medical literature showing that it is, you know, potentially dangerous. That doesn't necessarily play out in real life necessarily. So you have to take their suggestions a little bit with a grain of salt, but nonetheless, if it has a high rating, you can be sure, pretty confident that it's not going to have any sort of endocrine disrupting chemicals, you know, that sort of thing. And as I said, the brands that I mentioned, really those are the two that just come to mind. Elta also has a good sunblock that has mostly zinc in it as well. So there are brands on there, but if you go to EWG and look in their sunblock section, you'll get to see the ratings for these various sunscreens and sunblocks. Okay, so we're moving right along. Now we're going to talk a little bit about the skin microbiome. There's not a whole lot to say about the skin microbiome because it's sort of new science. It's definitely not as diverse as the gut microbiome, but we do know that the gut microbiome has an impact on the skin, just like we know it has an impact on the neurotransmitters in the brain that we spoke about in one of the previous episodes. The key with the skin microbiome is to avoid antibacterial soaps, which of course a lot of people are using these days. We are affecting our microbiomes because we're so scared of COVID. Certainly, we're damaging the natural skin microbiome of the hands, but what can we do at this point? Obviously, you can wash your hands, just like they say, you know, for a good 15 or 20 seconds, and that's going to remove anything that is on your hands. But most of us, you know, some are using antibacterial wipes, sprays, etc. What can you do? It's a strange situation that we're in, and just make sure that you're not using antibacterial soaps all over your body. That's going to be damaging the microbiome of your skin. Be calm, because stress is going to impact the skin microbiome, and you're going to want to sweat. Our ability to sweat is going to be something that is incredibly important for our overall health. For one, the skin is a detoxifying organ, and when you sweat, you excrete a lot of toxins from your sweat. And it's important for you to get a good sweat a couple times a week. This is incredibly important. We're talking about it in the context of the skin microbiome because the sweat is going to, in a sense, create an environment for the skin microbiome to be healthy. But keep in mind, especially in our modern world, that sweat can be a very important detoxifying organ, such that, you know, sort of doctors who specialize in this recommend that if you're going to be sweating, that you take a towel. Let's say you go into a sauna and you wipe down as much as possible, because as the sweat comes onto your skin, it's somewhat toxic, you know, because it's pulling things out, and therefore you want to take it off your skin as much as possible so that it's not reabsorbed into the body, interestingly. So you definitely want to sweat. Okay, so now for the next 15 minutes, we're going to be talking about anti-aging strategies. And there's going to be a lot here. Hopefully we'll cover it in the next 15 minutes. And we're going to start out by talking about diet, then habits, and then topical routines. And by the end of this, you'll really have all you need to know to sort of think about how to have healthy skin. So let's start with diet. The perfect diet for your skin is basically going to be low in sugar, low glycemic index. The reason here is that anytime you have a blood sugar spike, your sugar is binding to protein. And when sugar binds to protein, which you may not know, but collagen is a type of protein. So if sugar is binding to protein, that's going to change the type of collagen into something that is not going to provide the structure to your skin. In other words, when your blood sugar spikes, what happens basically is the sugar binds to the collagen, and it makes the collagen weaker, and you start to wrinkle. So this is part of skin aging. So you want to do everything you can to make sure that your blood sugar is not spiking. One way to sort of measure this type of sugar binding to protein is actually to get a hemoglobin A1C, which is something that your doctor often gets to check if you're diabetic, or sometimes they use it as a screening tool. Anti-aging doctors use it as a general indicator of how much sugar is bound to protein, because it's certainly an element of your aging, and it's certainly an element of keeping your collagen in its pristine, strong form. So you want to make sure that you are not getting blood sugar spikes. Obviously, things like all processed carbohydrates, flours are ground up. Even whole wheat flour is going to make your blood sugar spike. So grains that are processed, cooked, baked, all these things are going to make your blood sugar go up. Of course, things like sugar and fruit juices and such are also going to make them go up. Now, one principle of a healthy skin is to understand that we all have a thin layer of oil that essentially covers our entire body and acts as a barrier. And your skin is in a lot of circumstances, your skin is as healthy as your epidermal barrier, this lipid barrier, this oil barrier that is covering our entire skin. So if we can optimize the epidermal barrier, this lipid oil barrier on our skin's going to be healthy as possible. So how could you possibly eat for your epidermal barrier, this oil layer of your skin? Well, first of all, I've been talking about omega-3 and omega-6s. Now, if you go online, you're going to see all this information about how omega-3s are, the end-all be-all of helping have healthy skin. And I've always sort of fought against that, because I've known, and even before sort of the studies came out, I have to say that I was always under the impression and felt that it was actually not omega-3, but omega-6 that was more important for the lipid oil barrier of your skin. Because when I had patients with disorders of the lipid barrier, like, for example, atopic dermatitis or eczema, when I would optimize their omega-6 that they were taking in, and of course their omega-3 as well, but when we would optimize their omega-6, that's where I saw an enormous amount of improvement. And just this article in 2017 confirms what I've been talking about forever, that omega-6, or linoleic acid, is of particular significance to skin health, as it contributes to the formation of ceramides essential for the structure of the epidermal barrier. The absence of omega-6 containing ceramides in the stratum corneum results in barrier permeability problems, which basically means that the barrier function of your skin is compromised, which is going to lead to inflammation and the inability of your skin to do what it's supposed to do, which is protect you from the environment. So what is it about omega-6s? Well, first of all, what is an omega-6? Where do we find omega-6 fatty acids? They're maligned in the nutritional world because some people think of them as inflammatory. They're not inflammatory. They're inflammatory when you've eaten too many of them and you're eating them rancid. So let's briefly talk about this. If you've been listening to any of my previous episodes, we've gone through this before, but we'll go through it very, very quickly because we're coming up on, 35 minutes after the hour. So where do you find omega-6s? You find them in nuts and seeds. The problem is that people are eating too many of them, and not only are they eating too many of them, meaning they're getting them in the wrong way. Most of our exposure in the modern American public is from seed oils like sunflower, safflower, corn oil. All these have an enormous amount of linoleic acid, this omega-6 fat. The problem is when they make those seed oils, they're rancid. So you're essentially getting both oxidized and rancid oils that are not going to be in their pristine state to be able to use to create this oil barrier on your skin. So how do you get it in its natural form? Well, you eat it in its original packaging, which means eating raw nuts and seeds, a handful per day, or getting a very high quality oil like hemp seed oil that's refrigerated. I often recommend that for people who have this sort of problem with the epidermal barrier, just because it has a good ratio of omega-6 in its good form to omega-3 in a very good ratio. And it is easier for some people than, who they're not really, optimizing everything about their diet, and they're not making sure they get a handful of soaked raw nuts and seeds per day. And therefore they can take, a teaspoon or even a tablespoon of a good quality, unoxidized, light protected hemp seed oil, and that can be helpful. Or hemp seeds can be something you can put in. Amazingly, you can get a very good amount of both fat and protein from hemp seeds. Just 3 tablespoons of hemp seed in your salad, as an example, is going to give you a good amount of fat and an amazing amount, literally 10 grams of protein in just 3 tablespoons. So it's really, hemp is a lot of good reasons to use it. So if you're going all natural, handful of raw nuts and seeds per day. So the recommendation from me is to get your omega index. This is a blood test to see what your ratio of omega-6, how much omega-3 and how much omega-6 do you have in your red blood cells. Get rid of rancid omega-6 fats, so no seed oils, just get rid of them. Most processed foods have, sunflower, safflower types of oils in them. So obviously you're going to want to try to get rid of those particular types of oils. Get pure unadulterated linoleic acid, meaning from nuts and seeds, and that's how you get it. So those are my recommendations on making sure that your diet is consistent with having that oil barrier. Now, I wanted to mention something that just occurred to me that I didn't include in this. A study came out around last year, maybe last February or March, actually, that basically showed that dry skin, when you have dry skin all over your body, they actually were able to detect inflammation systemically, which basically means that your whole body was inflamed from just mild dry skin from head to toe, which means that the burden of disease potential in your body is increased just from dry skin. Because when you have an overall inflammatory state, then that is going to be something that potentially is going to increase your risk for various inflammatory diseases. So it is important to make sure that, one, you're eating for your epidermal barrier, as we discussed, which is going to create the oil, natural oil, that is going to protect this oil barrier so that your skin doesn't dry out. We'll get into care of your skin shortly. Now, these ceramides, which are forming the oils in your skin, they're part component of the oils that protect your skin. There are a lot of creams out there now, like CeraVe. The reason they call it CeraVe is because it has various ceramides in it, which is sort of a way your body naturally moisturizes your skin. So you can buy various different ceramide-containing moisturizers. And so this is a new generation of moisturizers that sort of try to duplicate the natural oils that your skin naturally produces. We spoke about how it's important to get your carotenoids and your polyphenols from all those pigmented leafy greens, as well as berries. Those are going to protect your skin a little bit from the sun. And then we have collagen. So your epidermal barrier, of course, is on the outside of your skin. So you have your epidermis, the top layer, and then you have the dermis. And inside the dermis, you have your collagen, which is basically the scaffolding of your skin. And if the scaffolding's not working, it's just going to droop and you're going to have wrinkles. So how can you eat for optimizing the collagen of your skin? Well, number one is vitamin C. Vitamin C is going to help with the cross-linking of these collagen fibrils that are creating the scaffolding of your skin. Making sure you get adequate protein consumption. And in this case, there is a potential role for using collagen. The reason there is because during digestion, of course, the collagen's broken up. It's not like you are going to eat collagen and then it's going to go into your blood as collagen, and then it's going to go into your skin as collagen. It's basically broken down into amino acids and what are called peptides. And some of these peptides that are formed from the digestion of collagen actually have been shown to have an impact on the collagen of your skin. Most of the study is done with fish collagen, and because I don't eat a whole lot of animal protein, as many of you know, I'm not a vegetarian or a vegan, but I don't eat all that much animal protein. I do supplement now with a fish collagen. And I think it's valuable for someone who is not eating an enormous amount of animal protein. But honestly, you really can get enough protein consumption from plants. As I mentioned, the hemp seeds, my gosh, 10 grams of just 3 tablespoons is pretty incredible. So obviously, even though some of you may not be eating, some of you may be vegan, as an example, it doesn't mean you have to go for fish collagen. I just think that there happens to be a role for it and has a potential impact. And especially for patients who aren't eating an enormous amount of animal protein, I do recommend fish collagen for collagen. Leafy greens, of course, are also going to have, believe it or not, protein as well that's going to help, in addition to all the carotenoids that we spoke about before. All right. Let's talk about some habits. Believe it or not, how you sleep, the getting the best sleep is going to be ideal, obviously, but sometimes you can get excess wrinkles from the way you sleep. I have dermatology colleagues who, it may sound crazy, but have trained themselves to sort of sleep on their back and not on their side, because you can get wrinkles when you sleep on your side. I know it sounds kind of crazy, but it is good to be conscious of how you sleep. And some of us have increased lines on one line of our bodies because not just from the sun, but also from the way we sleep. Be careful with your soap, because you don't want to damage the oil barrier of your skin, as we spoke about. We want to preserve that. So if you're using harsh soaps that are traditional soaps, things like Ivory or Dreft, and I'm sorry, or Irish Spring, these are pure soaps. They are good at degreasing things. And while we may have needed those types of soaps, when we were working in the fields and we were covered in grime, or working in the factory, we do not need to have these harsh soaps that degrease your skin to get clean. So there are other soaps. They're called Syndet bars, and things like Dove or Oil of Olay are not pure soaps by any stretch, and they don't really work by emulsifying the fat and removing the oil from your skin. The other thing I would like to say is that you don't need to scrub your body or put soap all over your body. We spoke about avoiding antibacterial soap, but if you're going to be using a lot of soap, you don't need to scrub from head to toe. We're not covered in dirt. Obviously, under your arms, your neck, your face, and your groin, etc., feet. These are areas you want to clean for obvious reasons, but that doesn't mean that every inch of your body needs to be scrubbed. You want to protect the microbiome of the skin. You want to protect the oil barrier of your skin, and you do so by not really going crazy on your skin with harsh soaps. Next, sort of unorthodox habit, I would say, is that for a lot of women and men who are interested in keeping their skin as healthy as possible, is to make sure you include your neck and your chest in your skincare routine, because these are very similar, and they also are getting the same amount of, a lot of times getting the same amount of sun. And so you want to include those in your skincare routine, which we'll talk about now, and we will end after that. So as I mentioned before, you want to moisturize your whole body. And we spoke about the reason to do that. And you have to think about your skin. It's an organ. And you need to treat it as one individual organ, which basically means you're not going to just put a little moisturizer on your hands and your face. You need to really moisturize your entire body. Now, men generally don't do this. And But as I said before, when people are, especially when they're elderly and they might not be getting the right amount of essential fatty acids that we spoke about, and I see this dry skin, now that I know about this study that shows this overall body inflammation, I'm certainly more inclined to recommend, especially if you have dry skin, to not just focus on the dry parts of your body, but to focus on your entire body. Next is to use a vitamin A based medicine or cream like retinol. So retinol can be found in many different over-the-counter types of moisturizers. And this is very good for your skin, but quite frankly, I would just ask your dermatologist for a retinoid. So tretinoin, Retin-A, Tazorac, all these are retinoids, and they are really, really good at helping you to improve the quality of your skin. They reduce the incidence of skin cancer. They increase the collagen. They normalize skin pigmentation. They are remarkable medicines, and I just recommend that you get a prescription for that. Next is to use a topical antioxidant. So the stars, I think, of this are their various topical vitamin C's, and also niacinamide, which is very similar to nicotinamide, which we spoke about up here when we spoke about, well, I'm not going to go up there, but we spoke about nicotinamide to reduce the incidence of skin cancers. But topical niacinamide is actually, which is also a vitamin B3, similar to niacin, is very good as an antioxidant, but it also helps with inflammation in the skin. So people who have kind of small irritation, get red types of irritations on their skin, it's a very good topical. So you should have a retinoid, which you would use at night, preferably a topical antioxidant that you may alternate with a chemical exfoliator, which really is going to be the preferred way that you improve the quality and the texture of your skin. So Pat's asking about a great moisturizer. Well, something with a ceramide in it would be like CeraVe that I spoke about, but there are various other ceramide-containing skin moisturizers, but also things that have alpha hydroxy acid in them. So lactic acid, there's something called ammonium lactate, which is something you can buy over the counter. It used to be a prescription, ammonium lactate 12%. And this is a very good alpha hydroxy acid that really acts to improve the texture of skin. It pulls water into the skin so it can plump the skin up a little bit, and is also good at, sort of exfoliating or taking off a little bit of the dead layer of skin to give the skin a little bit of an improved look. Exfoliators are basically broken down into alpha hydroxy, beta hydroxy, and polyhydroxy acids, but ultimately beta hydroxy acids are good for people who have oily skin or acne prone skin. Salicylic acid is one of them. I'm not going to talk too much. I'm not going to really talk about polyhydroxy acids. You're seeing them more out there now. They don't penetrate that much at all. So they're not as irritating. And for some people who can't tolerate alpha hydroxy acids, then they can tolerate polyhydroxy acid. But my suggestion is, if you try a glycolic acid and it's irritating, just go down in strength and see if you can get away with that, because alpha hydroxy acids are going to probably give you a better effect. So what's your skincare routine? Moisturizing your whole body with a ceramide, with a moisturizer that has ceramide, and also paying attention to an alpha hydroxy acid, getting a prescription from your dermatologist or using an over-the-counter retinol, and alternating in the morning a topical antioxidant like vitamin C that maybe has niacinamide in it or something of that sort. That's going to be the best thing that you can do. Now, I can't get away without talking about peptides and growth factors, and then we'll end tonight's episode. Peptides, which I spoke about a minute ago, about when you digest collagen, it's not going to break down necessarily into amino acids by themselves. See, a protein is made up of amino acids. like links in a chain. And when you digest them, they break apart and then you absorb them. When you have a couple amino acids still linked in a chain, let's say you have a chain of 10 amino acids, say a protein is 10 amino acids. Through digestion, maybe it breaks up into, 3, 3 and 4 chains of links. That would be called a peptide, maybe a chain of 3 amino acids. And in the body hacking community, people who are trying to, hack their bodies, all kinds of peptides are being injected into people for various effects. And in a sense, they act almost like medications, that they are able, oddly enough, just, a couple amino acids linked together, sometimes just 3 amino acids linked together, have a very unique biological impact on the body. It's actually a very interesting sort of trend. Now, in skin, the advantage of skin is that, of course, you can test it by applying it to the skin. And there have been various types of peptides that have been studied. Instead of injecting them, they're applied to the skin. And it's really quite fascinating. And so that's why I'm going to mention it. But basically, it's broken down into 3 types of peptides. There's signal peptides, carrier peptides, and neurotransmitting inhibiting peptides. And I'll start with the neurotransmitting inhibiting peptides, because I think all of you will understand it a little bit better. We all know that Botox works by blocking nerves, and therefore, since the muscles are no longer contracting, the wrinkles decrease. Well, believe it or not, they have peptides, again, which are just a couple amino acid chains that are able to decrease muscle activity, just similar to Botox, by applying them to the skin. These are often used around the eyes. And all of these peptide creams, there aren't a whole lot of studies about them. There are a lot of studies that are done in the lab on skin cells, and not a whole lot done, that are beyond sort of those sponsored by the companies that make these. So everything I'm saying you have to take with a grain of salt. However, I will tell you that and all of these, by the way, are well over $100. They usually run around $120 to like $180 for a very, very small, tube. But nonetheless, pretty amazing that some of these peptides can actually reduce muscle activity and therefore help with facial wrinkles. They're carrier peptides, which basically work by delivering copper, which activates various pathways in the skin that can help with remodeling the skin and stimulating collagen and hyaluronic acid, which sort of plumps up the skin. And then there's signal peptides, which basically have been shown to trigger synthesis of collagen and produce smoother and firmer skin. Now, these are, again, all very, very expensive. Not a ton of literature about them, but I certainly have patients who swear by some of these. I have met dermatologists who carry. I don't carry them in the office that I'm in, but who really swear by these. But the science is not completely there. But it's fascinating, and you're going to see more about it. And certainly, as you know, as you probably realize, that if you found that one of these would work, you're going to have to continue using it. Just like any cream, you're going to have to continue applying it to your skin. So it can be very expensive. And then we'll end with growth factors, which are kind of bizarre, but some of them are made from fibroblast cultures of human fetuses and other cell cultures from newborns. And these are direct growth factors that can stimulate various growth of collagen. It's somewhat creepy, if you ask me, that how they get them, but they are also obviously very, very expensive, usually over $100 as well for a very small tube. But I couldn't really get away with talking about it otherwise than this topic without mentioning peptides and growth factors, because you can get them. You can get them online at various skin cream stores out there. I'm not mentioning any brands for a reason. But if you have extra things that you want to ask me about that, please do let me know. I also would like to say that I do see dermatology patients online for consultations, and I have a website you can go to. It's consultwithdrcarp.com, and that will lead you to one of the dermatology platforms. So let's say you felt like you had a lot of sun damage and you live in the states of Florida, New York, or California, and so you wanted an evaluation for various anti-aging strategies, which might include, prescription for Retin-A, then definitely go to consultwithdrcarp.com, and that will lead you to a dermatology online teledermatology platform for that. Of course, most of you who I see on the list tonight, almost all of you, few people I don't know, but most of you know how to reach out to me. Certainly, you can go to my Facebook page and send me a message there. Or if you signed up, you can reply to the notices for these emails for the webinar. So that should cover your skin health. We covered everything from sun to sun protection to controversies, understanding sunscreens versus sunblocks, and various anti-aging topical strategies, as well as dietary strategies. And I hope that gives you one of those things. Sharon's asking if she has to be in one of those 3 states. Only if I can't give you a prescription, let's say, if you don't live in New York, California, or Florida. But certainly if you have a question that you would like to ask me, I'm happy to help you out in any way and direct you in any way that is necessary, as always. So thank you, everyone, for your attention. And I look forward to seeing you next week. I do believe last week I said that this week was going to be about vitamins and minerals, but I do believe that next week we'll be talking about that. And then the following week we'll be talking about protein, because there's so much controversy these days with protein, plant versus animal, etc. So thank you again. I hope everyone stays well, and I look forward to seeing you next week. Thank you again, everyone, for your attention. Have a great night. Thanks, Pat. Thanks for your words.